first realization of the importance of Father Gregory and Mustard Seeds communities took place during the first time we met the residents of Sophie's Place. The majority of them have severe cerebral palsy. They look different and few can speak coherently or even feed themselves. I was initially repulsed, but even after spending a short time with them, I could tell that they each have their own unique personalities. For example, Mary loves to sing, Donovan likes one-on-one attention, and Dominic just likes quiet and having his back rubbed. Then I realized that if it hadn't been for Mustard Seeds, these children would have been abandoned and probably died of neglect.
On our first day at the orphanage, I was given Moses to feed. He was not my first choice, nor my second, nor really any choice. He was probably the most visually repulsive of the severely palsied boys at the orphanage, to my senses at any rate. As Moses and I labored together to finish his dinner, I slowly came to get a sense of his unique personality. Despite his disabilities, his disfigurement, his poverty, and his inability to speak, Moses is a unique human being, created by God for a purpose just as important in God's eyes as my purpose. Wow.
I experienced Jesus in a special way through one of the residents named Dominic. Most of the other children were outside, but he was in one of the little open houses all by himself, making a lot of noise. Although I didn't really want to, I went in and started rubbing his back and talking to him. During that time, I thought about Jesus as saying, "Whatever you do to the least of my brethren, you did it to me." Later on, one of the others in our group mentioned how happy Dominic had looked during that time.
The morning of our second day, I woke up at dawn and decided to spend some time in the Adoration Chapel. Within minutes, Jesus came to me and Donovan, a 9-year-old orphan boy, with what appears to be perhaps something like Downs and some autism. Noticing that I had St. Faustina's diary with me, he asked me to read to him. Then he noticed my bookmark commemorating John Paul II's beatification and asked me to read the prayer on the back. To my astonishment, the prayer reads, "Lord, help me to experience your love for me. You made me unique and unrepeatable. For all eternity, you had a plan for my life, full of meaning and purpose." You know, I've read that prayer so many times, but had never read it in the way I read it that morning. On our third day, we labored hard alongside the orphanage staff. Although not orphans themselves, and although gainfully employed, they are what we Americans would label impoverished. I personally worked closely with a young man nicknamed Doulas. I'm not sure what kind of an education Doulas received as a child, but we had an awkward moment when I asked him what his nickname meant. He said he didn't know, so he told me to look it up on my phone. As I pulled my phone out to search on the web, I asked, "How do you spell it?" To which he mumbled something quick that I really didn't understand and sprinted off. I was a little befuddled until he returned tentatively spelling it out for me. It then dawned on me that Doulas wasn't sure how to spell his own name. Why do I share this moment, so seemingly insignificant, out of the entire day during which various of us volunteers painted, prepped rebar, mixed and poured concrete? Because that is when Jesus spoke most to me. See, Doulas may not know how to spell his name, nor does he have an impressive title, nor I'm sure a big house in a prestigious neighborhood, nor a new car, all the things that we Americans are told we need. but he was present and participating during each of the 3 prayer services held at the orphanage that day. I don't know Doulis's interior spirituality, but I very much got the impression working with him that he's entirely comfortable with what we would call his low socioeconomic status. Could I be that comfortable without the worldly trappings that I have accumulated? Would I participate in the prayer services as fervently? Or taking it a step further, would I actually be able to participate even more fervently if I were without? On the morning of our 5th day, I began my morning offering on the guest house veranda. It was at this time that little Donovan spied me from below and called up waving. I recalled the story that the staff had pieced together of the abuse they speculate he had suffered from his mother before being brought here. This got me to thinking about a reflection one of the staff had shared at a prayer service about how we cannot let ourselves be daunted by the magnitude of any problem. Of course, this message is nothing new, but this morning Donovan's greeting put a real face on it. Just think what Donovan's life would be like if the founders of this orphanage had not pushed forward in faith, hope, and prayer. I got to wondering if I've missed any opportunities to help others, even if in a less dramatic and more mundane way in my immediate life, because I felt overwhelmed. I know I have, but will resolve to step up more in faith, hope, and prayer.
Most of the Sophie's Place residents are unable to feed themselves, and feeding them presented a hands-on experience of the corporal works of mercy, even more so than donating food to a shelter or even handing out food to poor people. Their food is usually either oatmeal or bread soaked in milk, or more likely water, which we had to spoon into their mouths.
On the afternoon of our 5th day after a long day of work, I decided to step aside to a shaded spot under 3 trees where there was a strong breeze. A coveted thing on a steamy island afternoon. As I stood under the canopy of the trees enjoying the coolness, a grown man with a big toothy smile snuck around my left and reached out to me. It was readily apparent from his mannerisms that he was in some way mentally retarded. I couldn't understand him very well, but I did make out that his name is Adrian. It was also very easy to understand the pride Adrian has in his name. As we struck up a conversation of sorts, Adrian hopped up to sit on 2 boards that had been fastened between 2 of the trees, and invited me to do the same. I had noticed the boards, but had not realized exactly how to take advantage of them due to the way they were arranged. Now I was off my feet as well as in the breezy shade. What a relief! This experience underscored for me something we all know, but may not consistently put into practice. Basically, you can't judge a book by its cover. There was nothing about Adrian that would cause you to expect that he would be able to help me. In fact, on the contrary, everything about him seemed to highlight his neediness. Now, Adrian is undoubtedly needy in many ways, but not in every way, and my day was blessed by his presence in it. When it was time to go, I thanked Adrian for his hospitality, and in my heart, I thanked God for sending him to teach me a lesson. On our 6th day, I found a couple of local Jamaican newspapers in the area where the gatekeeper and shuttle driver take breaks. Being intrigued, I sat down to read them. I was soon joined by Chrisagay, a unique Jamaican name, who appears to have some slight palsy and doesn't talk but for a very few words. She kept pointing at the various photos in the paper and looking at me with her characteristic wide, toothy smile. Each time I would provide my description of the photo, to which Chrissa Gay would smile and sometimes giggle. This went on for a while. By the time we had gone through the papers a couple of times, Rosina came and joined us, and upon seeing Chrissa Gay's and my interaction, matter-of-factly says, "You know she's deaf?" No, I didn't," I replied. As Rosina and I interjected some sign language while going through the papers yet again, Chrissa Gay's face really lit up. Our volunteer leader passed by and told us Chrissa Gay's story. Before she came to the orphanage, she had been abused and given up as mentally retarded. Upon arrival at the orphanage, she was discovered to be deaf. The most heartwarming part of the story is that Chrissa Gay will be starting some high school in the fall. Of course, I had to reflect on this encounter. How many Chrissa Gays are there in our lives? Persons we encounter but treat disrespectfully, rudely, inappropriately, or even just ignore because we do not understand them. Of course, we should never treat any other fellow human being that way. But it's a lot easier treating others well if you take the time and effort to understand them.
One of the days we went to the beach, and there I had an experience which showed me that it's much more rewarding to see others having fun than to have self-centered fun for oneself. Many of the palsied children wanted to go in the water, which required us to entirely support them in the water because they are unable to do so themselves. It was physically very tiring, but it was definitely worth it to see them so happy and having so much fun.
On our last day, we took some of the orphans to the beach. I must admit that I was more than a little skeptical with the idea of bringing wheelchair-bound, severely palsied children to the sand and surf. What could they possibly get out of a beach day? Well, after the first big smile from Laura, a nearly paralyzed older girl whom I held in the small waves, I came to learn that they enjoy the beach in pretty much the same way mobile and verbal people do, perhaps more because it is a relatively rare event for them. I'm sure it's also therapeutic in certain ways, with the sensation of floating as well as the water pushing in various directions. In addition to Laura, I held Monique, a roughly 12-year-old girl with Downs. Despite me holding her in the waves for multiple extended periods of time, her shrieking at each oncoming wave never ceased. This brought all of us within earshot a lot of joy. Is there a lesson in this? I'm not sure. Perhaps it's that we should be open to trying new things with others we know, and by doing so we might bring both them and us great joy. Perhaps you know someone who is homebound or otherwise confined, and taking him or her somewhere, or even just visiting, might bring great joy to both of you. Perhaps we may be surprised at the joy that can come from just reaching out to others, despite initially thinking that it won't make a difference.